Emmett Till was a 14-year-old African-American boy from Chicago. In August of 1955, he traveled to Money, Mississippi to visit family. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, had warned him that the South was very different from the North, especially when it came to race. But Emmett was a fun-loving, confident kid. While in Mississippi, Emmett and some friends went to Bryant's Grocery, a small store owned by a white couple, Roy and Carolyn Bryant. What happened in that store is still debated, but Carolyn later claimed that Emmett flirted with her or whistled. In the deeply segregated South, any suggestion of a black boy interacting with a white woman that way was considered dangerous. A few nights later, on August 28th, Roy Bryant and his half-brother, J.W. Milam, went to the home where Emmett was staying. They kidnapped him at gunpoint. They took him to a barn where they beat him savagely, shot him in the head, tied a cotton gin fan around his neck with barbed wire, and threw his body into the Tallahatchie River. His body was discovered 3 days later. It was swollen and disfigured, but he was identified by a ring he was wearing, his father's. Back in Chicago, Emmett's mother decided to hold an open casket funeral. She wanted the world to see what had been done to her son. Photos of Emmett's mutilated body were published in Jet magazine and shocked the nation. Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam were put on trial in Mississippi. Despite powerful testimony, including from Emmett's uncle Mose Wright, who bravely pointed out the killers in court, the all-white jury found them not guilty. A few months later, protected from further prosecution, Bryant and Milam admitted to the murder in an interview with Look magazine. Emmett Till's death became a turning point in American history. It awakened a lot of people to the horrors of racism, and his story helped spark the civil rights movement. Carolyn Bryant, who later became Carolyn Bryant Donham, was never charged or convicted in connection to Emmett Till's death. Decades later, in interviews and reports, it came out that parts of her original story were likely false or exaggerated. A researcher even found an unpublished manuscript in which she seemed to downplay her role and admitted that she couldn't recall exactly what Emmett had said or done. There was renewed effort to bring charges against her in the 2010s and early 2020s, especially after more evidence and records were uncovered. The grand jury reviewed the case in 2022, but declined to indict her. She passed away in 2023 at the age of 88. Her life and the fact that she never faced legal consequences have remained a source of deep pain and frustration for many, especially given the impact her accusation had on Emmett and the civil rights movement. It's a powerful reminder of how injustice can echo across generations. There are a few more important pieces that add depth to the story. One thing that stands out is how brave Emmett's great-uncle, Mose Wright, was during the trial. In a segregated courtroom filled with white people, he stood up and pointed directly at Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, saying, "There he is." That was incredibly dangerous for a black man to do in Mississippi at the time, and it took enormous courage. Mamie Till Mobley was truly remarkable. After Emmett's murder, she made a decision that changed history. She insisted on an open casket funeral. She said, "Let the world see what they did to my boy." That act forced millions of people to confront the brutality of racism in a way they couldn't ignore. She didn't stop there. She spoke out across the country, telling Emmett's story to churches, civil rights groups, and media outlets. She became a voice not just for her son, but for justice more broadly. She turned unimaginable grief into power and purpose to make sure the world didn't forget what happened. She became a civil rights activist and spent her life speaking about racism, injustice, and the need for change. She was central to turning Emmett's death into a national moment of reckoning. Later, she earned a degree in education and spent much of her life working as a teacher. She also helped found the Emmett Till Players, a youth group that performed speeches by civil rights leaders to keep the history and message alive for young people. She passed away in 2003 at the age of 81, but her legacy is deeply felt. People still draw strength from her courage and her refusal to stay silent. So after Emmett's death, Mamie became one of the first people to turn personal tragedy into a national movement. She aligned herself with the NAACP and traveled nonstop, giving speeches and raising awareness. She met with key civil rights leaders and helped spark a shift in how the country talked about racial violence. In the years that followed, she continued to teach and work in her community, but she never stopped pushing for justice, not just for Emmett, but for others too. She wrote a memoir later in life called Death of Innocence, which tells her story in her own words. As for how she's honored today, many schools, foundations, and civil rights programs bear her name. Her work is also central in museums like the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And when President Biden established the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument in 2024, it officially recognized her role in shaping the civil rights legacy of this country. She's remembered as a mother, a teacher, a leader, and someone who stood up when so many others would have stayed quiet. Emmett Till, he was just 14. Emmett Till traveled from Chicago to Mississippi in 1955 to visit family. He was accused of whistling at a white woman. For that, 2 white men kidnapped him, tortured him, shot him, and dumped his body in a river. When they found him, his face was unrecognizable. But his mother, Mamie Till, made the world look. She left the casket open. She wanted everyone to see what hate had done to her child. His killers were acquitted by an all-white jury. Later, they admitted to the murder. They never spent a single day in prison. Emmett Till's murder wasn't just a tragedy. It was a turning point, a spark that helped light the fire of the civil rights movement. We can't forget him. Carolyn Bryant lived a long life. She died in 2023 at the age of 88. And for decades, there was growing suspicion and anger over her role in Emmett Till's death. In 2017, a historian named Timothy Tyson revealed that Carolyn had told him in a 2008 interview that Emmett never made any verbal or physical advances toward her. She reportedly admitted, that part's not true. But later, her family disputed that she ever recanted, and she never publicly confessed or faced any legal consequences. Despite calls for her to be prosecuted, a grand jury declined to indict her in 2022. So no, she never faced justice, and she remained largely silent about the case for most of her life.